Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creator Toolbox, a show brought to you by the ServiceNow Developer Program, where we demo the newest, latest, and greatest ServiceNow features for every developer's toolbox. We are in the middle of our Vancouver release, officially on week 2 of the content. So be sure to check out the content calendar at devlink.sn/Vancouver. Thank you so much, Earl, for putting down the link. Before we jump into the content today, which you can tell I am extremely excited for, let's go ahead and do some introductions first because we have some new faces on today's live stream. I'll kick things off. My name is Laura Mcmanamon. I'm a member of the developer advocate team alongside the likes of Chuck Tomasi, Earl Duque, and Pranav Bhagat. I just had my 6th anniversary at ServiceNow, which is very exciting, and was formerly a member of the Creator Workflows SC team. So that's why a little bit of my bias shows through on some of these low and no code features. So I will kick things over to the gentleman on my right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Earl Duque. I am a senior developer advocate here at ServiceNow. I just had my 2-year anniversary here at the company, but before that, I was doing ServiceNow development for 3 different customers over the course of 6 years-ish, from anywhere. I think I started from an admin and then went all the way to team lead as a developer, mostly in higher ed. So multi-tenant space is the name of the game for me, and all of that kind of extra organizations all over the place. And for Bim.
Hey, I'm Brian Bimschleger. I am a PM for some of our workflow automation products here at ServiceNow. I've been here about 3 years now, a little bit more, and I've worked on everything from Flow Designer to Pad, and I'm working on some cool new stuff now. So very excited to join, and thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you. So last year, I believe it was Jake Berman that we had on the Flow Designer specific call. And I kind of used it as an opportunity to kind of test my own acumen and overall proficiency of Flow Designer. So you can kind of sit back and relax and help me kind of dive into the deeper facets of what has changed in the Vancouver release. So sound good for you? Sounds good. Awesome. Well, the first thing I wanted to call attention to is one of the intangible, or at least there's no UI representation of this change, which is the overall performance enhancements made to the speed of Flow Designer. This was something I kicked off in the Vancouver Tech Now presentation, was that there was some substantial reductions in time due to kind of some not renegade API calls, but just some more back-end API calls that were going longer than intention. So do you have any background on that, or how'd that process go?
Yeah, so one of the things we identified, both from our own internal testing and from a lot of discussions with customers, was that big flows took a long time to load, or flows that had a lot of subflows in them. And behind the scenes, it was something like we were just trying to load everything all at once. A lot of repeated calls to make sure we had everything. And we just took a better look at how we were trying to get all that content in the first place. And now it's a little bit more sequential, a little bit more progressive, with really an emphasis on getting you to see anything in your flow a lot sooner and having it be a lot more responsive when you make changes. So there's a lot of stuff under the hood, but as you noted, Lauren, it's really one of those intangible things where the overall feel of using Flow Designer should just be a little bit snappier and not as sluggish as you may have recognized in previous releases.
Well, I love that. I think the specific numbers called out were a 95% reduction in time to load Flow Designer. I think it was 98 for overall logic, and then 99 for the relationship between Subflow and Flow, which was really that part in particular. I was like, oh my gosh, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where we noticed when people were loading in flows that had a lot of subflows, there was a big performance hit. And that's, frustrating because a lot of what we communicate out to our customers is, hey, you should build modular, operate in subflows first and use those within your parent flows. And we had accidentally created an environment where that was a sluggish process. So we're really pleased that now what our recommendation is for building flows is actually a fast and usable experience as well.
I'm still in my past works chat, and maybe every month I see them say, this flow takes so long to load.
No. Well, I like the trend. I think that like what made me so excited about Vancouver is like I mentioned earlier that I was on the sales team and I was always so excited for people to try out Flow Designer, but there's always two specific like reasons that they usually were like, oh, we'll just stick full workflow editor. One was the speed, right? Of like, oh, like I can do things, I can code faster or the thing loads faster sometimes in workflow editor, which I don't think is true anymore. And also the kind of grand finality of today's thing, which I'll leave towards the end as I've teased it. I think people can probably guess what I'm talking about, but we're going to see that today as well, which is exciting. So enough kind of waxing poetic about the intangible or like hopefully intangible. Like speed is one of those things where like if it's great, you shouldn't notice it, right? You only notice it when it's when it's not really up to par. So let's talk about the things that are visibly tangible changes to Flow Designer. So I'm going to go ahead and actually showcase my instance. One thing that I like to do with Flow Designer, because it is a platform feature, is I really like to showcase it from a personal developer instance. PDIs, as they are also known, are instances that you can get today for free. That is a remarkable asset that people do not take advantage of enough. So today, if you go to developer.servicenow.com, you can get a free instance of Vancouver to play around with. That is what I'm using here today. So everything that you see is something within your bounds. Now, the first thing that I notice as someone that's used Flow Designer a lot is we have finally gotten the branding up to date, which is really, really exciting. So no more pastels, no more what was the color name? Was it mint or
Yeah, mint. I think the new
mint?
color is wasabi green.
Wasabi green.
I hope nobody from brand is watching because ironically, we haven't updated the background for this show yet. It's still the mint.
Great. Now we're the ones behind. Well, beforehand we had an excuse of like, well, it matches the platform. So now we have something that matches.
Robot.
I know. We'll find. We'll make it on Canva. We can do our best.
All right.
So the other thing that I noticed, aside from this now being wasabi green, is the fact that this is a new homepage. Beforehand, which if we scooch on over, I actually have an instance of Utah up. Ignore how the branding also changed on Utah. But this was the previous homepage, which was very similar to just a list on ServiceNow. Now, granted, it was kind of tabular with what you're looking for, but this is no different than opening up just a generic list. And that kind of it was kind of like an outlier compared to how everything else was moving much towards a dashboard-like experience. You saw that with App Engine Studio. You definitely saw it with the UI builder and things like this. It's all becoming more modular and wizard-like in design. So we see that now reflected in Flow Designer. So we have our standard list here. However, on the right-hand side, we see some interesting things. One thing is I see what I was testing before this call. So you can see exactly where I left off. So you don't really have to even go into the list if you're working in the same one or two things alternately. This, I will say, has not been configured. However, you can add in execution metrics. So if you're running a lot of flows and need heuristic data on how they are performing well or poorly, that can be embedded directly into the homepage. And this obviously says everything is from sysadmin because this is my PDI. I'm the only one that has access to this. However, if this was a team environment, you could also see what your teammates are working on. What was the design choice in adding or in prioritizing adding the team activity aspect to the homepage?
Yeah, for sure. So we have research partners that we work with internally, and we're always reaching out to customers and internal business units to see how people actually use Flow Designer and all of our workflow automation products. And especially when working with teams like App Engine Studio or people that might be creating flows for other business units like customer service management or CSM, it's always like a team aspect. Somebody might start on a flow, like I might start to build a flow, and then Earl might come in because he's building a custom action that I need. So between the two of us, we're achieving one outcome for our business. And we realized with the old Flow Designer homepage, it was just really hard to understand when other people from your team did something to one of your flows. And sure, like the old view had an updated by, but
on what,
yeah, like it's a simple piece of information, and we opted to go for a more modern approach where we almost have a feed of updates and make it clear who was the person, what did they edit, and it really facilitates a lot of that team environment where it's a collaborative building experience.
I think it also kind of it also showcases the maturation of the product. Like when I first started using Flow Designer, it was very common for like one person at an entire company to do all of the Flow Designer work.
Yeah,
Someone was like judge, jury, and executioner, which obviously today isn't not necessarily the case, or hopefully is not the
yeah,
case to be the goal, right? You want to be able to easily
yeah.
democratize development. And I like seeing stuff like that right on like the homepage to see.
Now, one of my favorite parts on this page as well
Mm.
is like we have recent activity, which certainly optimizes for team environment, team awareness. But one thing that kept coming up as well is like pick up where you left off is great, but bugs happen, defects happen. Someone's going to ping you and say, "Hey, this flow is broken, unexpected outcome, whatever." If we click on that all work toggle in the top right of that page, you can quickly filter to just stuff that you have created. And it's
Oh,
like a one click filter for just your flows. And that was like a single, very specific request that came up over and over and over and over from people. Like, I work in a big company, hundreds of ServiceNow developers here. I just need to find the things that I made because I forget the name of it. I made it a
yeah.
while ago, whatever. So that, it's just one little drop down in the top right, but it's one of those things that has resonated really, really positively in our early testing.
That's lovely. I did not know that was added. So thank you for sharing that with me as
Hey,
well.
this is why we bring the team on for these types of calls.
Heck yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the last thing too, which is it's not worth like not drawing attention to it, right? Is that resources are embedded directly into the homepage. Like we saw that with App Engine Studio, I think was one of the first to kind of say, hey, if you are building, here are the resources that ServiceNow kind of certifies and recommends. So I like having all these things directly embedded into the platform for easy use, for help, for reference, for whatever you need. And that kind of covers the homepage. Did I miss anything other than this lovely created by toggle?
Well, yeah, there was a comment from Ola saying, is recent flows configurable? For example, he wants to show the last 5 instead of the last 2.
Mm.
I believe this will show 3.
Mhm.
And the only reason it's showing 2, I think, is because this is a PDI and you just got in and there maybe only have been 2 flows that
Yes,
you have
correct.
updated. So it'll show a maximum of 3. And at this moment, I don't believe that is a user configurable property.
Okay, good to
But
know.
to tease some stuff for upcoming releases, we have continued big changes coming to the homepage that have a real focus on tying our builders together.
Mhm.
So expect to see better integration between Flow Designer, Pad, Decision Builder, Workflow Editor, Action Designer. Um, one space where you launch into all those things and you get better visibility into how they all connect.
See, this is the problem with having y'all product guys on this team. You make me greedy for the next Vancouver just came out. And I'm like, what about Washington?
No,
Yeah.
like you tease. You
Yeah.
tease.
Well, we got to keep you coming back. We give you just a taste of the new homepage, and then we give you the good stuff. So yeah,
True. Well, let's move past the homepage. I think we've covered everything that mostly that it showcases. If anything I've missed, please let me know in the comments of this video as well. But let's dive into the actual changes made to flows. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the recently used tab to open up this log count change. I've been working on a social media tracker app, so this was it's counting the changes in followers. So if you're wondering what this flow is doing, that is its purpose. But I already see one opportunity to showcase a change. In this action here, which is looking up a series of records, if I go ahead and open it, I see that it showcases 2 data pills. Data pills are essentially when you utilize one of these guys over here to access values stored within objects on ServiceNow. So inside of this record, if I wanted something inside of this account, selecting this adds this as a data pill that can be dragged and dropped throughout this interface. Now, previously on Utah, these were not editable entities. So as I kind of look at it, it's kind of hard to tell at the pill level, right, without hovering over what it represents. And so if I needed to change it, there was a likelihood that I could make some human error there as well. Now on Vancouver, if I click the pill itself, not only can I get a very clear representation of that data path, but it is editable. So if I want to change this to the count table instead, I can.
Beautiful.
Yeah, very nice, because I've goofed up on a lot of those.
Yeah, especially if you're dot walking through like 8 menus too.
Oh yeah, like this is actually not the best like example because it's only 3 like pills. There's been occasions when it's been like 8, 9 pathways just to get to the thing that you are looking for, and that's not atypical at all.
Yeah, and a little bit of like behind the scenes storytelling. This is one of the, like, obviously it's a smaller feature relative to some of the other stuff that we're building, and it was a little bit more like unheralded when we were talking about building it and planning out the work. But when we did our demo to our wider engineering team, this is one of the features that legitimately got applause from the engineers on the team who aren't like in Flow Designer, but they're on other products, because this is such a point of frustration from, fat fingering or trying to click on something, you just got the wrong value and you got to go back and do it all again. So sometimes it's the small stuff that really just makes things a lot easier. So
when it's your interface day to day, it makes sense that those little things make the biggest change.
Absolutely. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, like I don't even use it day to day, and I was applauding to see something like that because it just shows some like a polish like on the platform. I love seeing stuff like that improved. I'm not going to save those changes, but I am going to jump into Subflow. So I've got a lot of questions. I got a lot of questions at Knowledge about the difference between flows and subflows. I would articulate the difference between them as they're basically doing the same thing, right? They're utilizing actions and logic to do things regardless of human interaction on or off of ServiceNow. The critical difference between the two is that flows are triggered by specific events within that you define within the platform. So for example, a flow can be triggered by editing or changing or creating a record. So if you add an incident, that could trigger a flow. An event within the system, so could also trigger a flow. And then probably one of the more common ones as well is that it could be time oriented, right? It could be every Tuesday at 6 o'clock, for example. The difference is that subflows exist as entities within flows, right? So they cannot be called. They have to be strategically placed inside flows to be arrived at through the logic. Is that an accurate description, Bim?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love using this as an opportunity to polish up on my own acumen of flow design.
One of the interesting, like, hidden features of normal flows as well, like your description is accurate, where they trigger off of a record being created or being scheduled or something like that. But if you have your flows that are scheduled or that run whenever a record is created or updated, there's actually a setting that you can update where you can use those flows in your flow as well. You just pass a record in, almost like it's a subflow.
Oh.
So it's a little bit hidden. The use case is a little bit niche, but technically it's possible to use flows inside of flows, and if you just want to have it operating off of a single record.
You can get really recursive with it, really confused.
Does it click through and everything, or is it just like it's running in the background because you set it to create a record?
Well, it wouldn't run on the record created. It would run on the record that you pass into it.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Well, regardless, I will say that the prescripted reason. So I also then got the question of like, why build subflows, right? If they're just the same thing as flows, why build them? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One thing is that we love to recycle entities, right? So if you find a pattern that's existing across multiple of your flows that needs to be the same for all of them, it would be nice if it was a subflow because then you can change it just one place and it cascades throughout all of the flows that are calling it. Another reason is that for flows that were very, very lengthy, compartmentalizing that logic, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, helps speed up the flow, loading, and things like that, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it runs a little bit cleaner, a little bit faster as well. And really to support this this model of like a subflow first mentality, really
Mm.
having it be modular, I believe it was in Utah that we released the ability to select several actions and convert them to a subflow from directly within the builder canvas.
Yes.
So gone are the days of building out a flow, realizing that steps 4 through 9, you actually need them in your next flow and you need to manually rebuild them all. No, you just select 4 through 9, convert to subflow, boom. It maps all your data pills, it generates inputs for you. It's it's handy.
I believe there was a lot of attention on that knowledge. So if you haven't checked that out
Yeah.
yet, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do so. So now that there's been more and more a focus on flows, there is a greater desire to kind of catch them up, right? They were a newer entity. They only came out a couple of releases ago. I mean, I say a couple, it's probably been like 5 or 6. But they are a relatively newer entity in comparison. So there were a few things that needed to be made feature parity with their parent entity, with Flow Designer. Here is a simple test flow I've created. So you can see from the get-go, it is a little bit different looking. So instead of having a trigger, it says inputs and outputs. That's because you can pass in values and also give values back to the parent flow that might be calling it. But one critical difference I see, which I can prove is the case if I open up a subflow over here. So I can already tell how much faster of a version the other one is. There is no diagramming view. So this is showing all the inputs and outputs for this subflow. There's no diagramming view toggle, and there is in Vancouver. So diagramming view was kind of made as a response to the people that really loved Workflow Editor for its UI. If you've never looked at Workflow Editor before, it was the predecessor, spiritual predecessor to Flow Designer, and had a flow chart kind of oriented look. That look was very preferred by like a good group of people. And so the diagramming view was made to satisfy that need of like, hey, I like the natural language stuff. I want to see a diagram. Totally fine. And now you can see that in subflow views as well. And in addition to this, there is also the concept of adding stages. So this is actually an entity I'm not super well versed in. What is the primary purpose of stages within Flow Designer?
Yeah, so stages are primarily used for catalog fulfillment. So when someone requests a catalog item, you can use a flow to kind of power that step through process and get all the approvals and things like that. And within the flows and now subflows as well, you can use stages to communicate back up to the request what stage the request is at. It's pretty handy, and stages being limited to the classic Flow Designer and not subflows was a frustrating limitation for a lot of folks who used Flow Designer to power a lot of their service catalog fulfillment, but also wanted to not repeat themselves. They wanted to use subflows, and they wanted to get into a more modular creation experience. So between subflow stages and editing subflows in a diagram, we're really trying to get subflows up to that same level as flows as well.
It's such a small thing, but because of that idea of subflows are meant to be the things that you want to repeat, a lot of people expressed, "Oh, we can't." It not having stages and subflows dictates how we build our flows now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because now you have to handle stages at the top level of a flow. And so now your subflows are now divided by stage instead of by functionality. And so that was happening even in my last workplace of like, oh, we can't do subflows and stages. So I guess we're going to design around that. And
Yeah.
that's not the intent of what you want to be doing in a subflow necessarily. So it's a good updates to bring, again, like parity to what a lot of our workflow editor holdouts were, because stages are important for catalog fulfillment.
Yeah, love that. That's probably why I wasn't clear. I'm like, I haven't done much catalog experience when I was a customer. So I was like, I think I know what they mean, but I don't want to speak out of turn. Well, I wanted, before we switch over to BIM's point of view, I wanted to make sure, were there any questions in the audience that I hadn't addressed yet?
The relevant to Vancouver questions, BIM did a good job at answering live. Things that are just kind of side stuff we're answering in the chat.
Perfect. I appreciate that, guys. Well, now we're going to be switching over to BIM's point of view. Why is that? Well, the last two features, one is not available just yet. It's very, very close, soon available. And the other is something that is in limited release. So back when we did the Tech Now webinar, I made a slight boo-boo in saying that Now Assist was available with the general release of Vancouver. Similar to all of the Gen AI things for App Engine and Flow Designer, it'll be available in the second store release. So it'll be coming out in November, so it's not too far away. But I made a slight error. So it won't be available on your PDI, which is what I'm trying to communicate. Second, which I got a lot of questions about already, like on Twitter and stuff, is the go back action, or excuse me, the go back flow logic that was added in Vancouver. This is available. However, it is in limited release, which means you can call customer service today and have them turn this on your platform if you're really, really interested in testing it out. But there's no way to turn it on yet on a PDI. So I just want to clarify, like, one of these things is out, just not on PDIs, and one will be out in November.
Yeah. So yeah, like you mentioned, both of these are like highly requested items, and both of them are kind of available right now, to differing levels. But that's because these are hotly requested items. These, especially Go Back To, has been in the idea portal forever. Since I started, 3.5 years ago, it's been one of the top ideas. People want to go back. Up until now, that recommended guidance has been like, well, we'll just, put it all in a giant loop with a do until, which is like, it's fine, but it's not exactly it's not exactly what people want. So we're going to be making that a little bit more declarative, but there are some kind of under the hood changes behind the scenes that we are polishing up and getting ready for full public availability in the Washington release. But if you do contact support for Go Back To, they'll walk you through some of the things to be aware of and what some of the implications are, because there's a couple underlying changes with the Flow engine itself if you enable it.
Got it.
But when those Flow engine changes are made widely available in the Washington release, all sorts of excellent runtime performance implications are going to be there, like a much faster, easier to log and report data with less flows are less heavy, so that less impact to your instance when they're running. So
I can visualize the PowerPoint slides now with the comparing times.
Cool. So let's check out what we've got. So this is a sample flow, business process approval flow. And the first thing that we are going to show is Now Assist recommendations. Mm-hmm. There's been a big push in AI in a lot of companies now. It's, all the rage. But this is something we've actually been working on for, about a year or two now, really trying to make it easier for people to build their flows faster and more accurately. And like those are our two objectives with this. So it's really fun to see this come to fruition, because we know as soon as you try and build a flow, there's hundreds of actions. There's a lot of different logics, so many subflows. I'm just trying to build a standard catalog approval fulfillment request. Like there's got to be some guidance there.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we are launching in later this year, as Lauren mentioned, is the ability to show recommended actions. And the recommendations are really nice. For this Vancouver release, they're going to be based exclusively off of an internal ServiceNow model. So any customer that uses this, it's all the same model. Everyone's getting the exact same recommendations, but these recommendations are based on flows that us ServiceNow use to power all of our instances, all of our out of the box stuff, all of our business units. So these are the best in class examples of the right sequence to add steps together, add logic, chain actions together. Now, what's really cool about this is, right now we are looking at recommendations at the end of a flow. But anytime I click in to add an action, I can see recommendations at that step as well. So anytime you click in, it always looks for what are the actions that occurred before this moment in time,
Like
and
asking
what
for
are the highest
approval.
probability of actions that should be added right here.
I love that too, because like that's such a common thing to wait for something to happen after the approval, and it's already suggesting that as one of the recommendations.
For
That's so
sure, for
cool.
sure. And the if is like, all right, is it if
Yeah.
it's approved, do this. If it's declined, do this. Or I'm going to wait for it to be either approved or declined. So it's pretty handy. But if we go to the bottom right here, we can see that this flow starts with an if at the top,
Mhm.
and the top recommendation is an else if. So it's already helping me to continue or close the loop on logic that I've started, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
almost like
yeah,
IntelliSense for a UI, basically.
Yeah.
yeah, it's super handy. And you know, we realize that we know how our internal flows have been built, but we don't know exactly what our customers are going to build. They might have, organization specific design patterns, or they're trying to accomplish something that, is unique to them. So there's a lot of debate internally about, hey, should we just auto populate what we think is the best action next?
Mm.
But what we realized is there's only so much that we can know. So we kind of give you the top X, the top, four, top five that we think are the best fits for what you're trying to do. And it was exactly for that, approval step up top. We don't know
Can
if
I
you want to
add,
route
can
based on
you
it. We
drill
don't
into that a
know.
little bit? I'd love to know, is it like a logic tree where it's deciding what to recommend? Is it built off of a model based off of what people have made on these flows? What
Yeah.
what goes into the recommended?
Yeah, so we actually do an audit of all of the flows that we create internally across all of our instances that we use for support and our internal instances, and any out of the box flows that business units ship. And we tag each one of them. So we try and identify what each flow is looking to accomplish. We identify the specific sequence of actions within those flows. So anytime we click add on a step right here, well, we're looking for the things that came before it, and we're trying to pattern match with that sequence of stuff across the entire model of all of our flows. So it's not a hard logic tree, and it would evolve if we ship more ServiceNow flows out of the box.
Cool. Which is actually even cooler than I thought, because that means it's recommending based off of what we internally have determined as a good practice
Correct.
with our products.
Yeah.
That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and future releases will have enhancements, so it's more customer specific. So it will adapt to customer flows that they create. So this is helpful because some companies have very specific patterns where they need certain items in a certain sequence, or they always want to audit a step or log some data after they use specific actions. So it will be more adaptive to each individual customer in upcoming releases.
That's really cool. That's nice.
Yeah. So this is nice. It's very handy. This is part of a lot of the larger Now Assist push that is being released in this time frame and later this year within ServiceNow. But then the next one is What are we talking about next? Oh, yes, one of the most top voted features since I've been here.
Yeah. It got the
So,
most applause during Tech Now.
so here we go. If I go into Flow Logic, boom, we have go back to. Now, go back to is really fun because it effectively acts as a loop. But we only allow you to go back to places that won't get you in trouble from like a data flow or from a looping perspective. So as soon as you add in your go back to, we kind of curate that list because I can't go back to, if I'm in an else if branch, I shouldn't be able to go back into step 4 right here because there was a lot of other logic and pathing that happened
Mhm.
before then. So you can always go up to your kind of the parent level, or you can go to anything that immediately preceded you as well. And it was through a lot of user testing and actual data testing and runtime testing that we really wanted to get this right because we didn't want to create an experience that allowed our users, our customers, the dear watchers of this video stream, we didn't want you to get into trouble if you're using this and you're building something. So we try and create a couple guardrails that allow you to achieve some outcomes without, getting yourself in a bad place.
You don't want people to use it to bypass, like in this case, it's for an approval. So you wouldn't want someone to jump into a part where like they didn't approve it, right? And so you don't want to use it as like a workaround. It's supposed to be for your like benefit, not for like nefarious
Yeah.
purposes.
Now, what else is we talked about some of the nice touches earlier.
Yeah.
Expanding a data pill or having a nice little toggle for my flows versus all flows on the homepage. This one is like a personal favorite of mine because we see customer built flows all the time. A lot of times there's 20, 30 steps. And the reason there are so many steps is because you branch at step 5 and then each branch of the if has 10 steps in it. All of a sudden your flow is really big.
Mhm.
But if we click on this button right here, it will scroll you up to where you're going back to and highlight it. And it's got this little icon that says you can come back here from step 8. So we have these nice visual indicators and affordances that tell you exactly how you're getting there and where you're going. It's small, but when you have big complex flows, especially in this view where a lot of things are indented and it's kind of hard to see pathing, this was a nice touch that really resonated positively with our internal team.
That's
Kudos to your,
lovely. I wish
kudos to
more
your React
software.
developers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right now with this instance, I'm having a little bit of a bug where the diagram view is not working with GoTo. But as Lauren mentioned earlier, if you go and contact support to enable this, the feature fully works with the diagram view, and it has a line that will take you all the way back. Just like we do with everything else in diagram view, you can kind of trace with your finger where you're going. So it's pretty handy, and we got this request a lot from a lot of people. So we're really happy to introduce it. It unlocks a lot of different outcomes and use cases for folks that use Flow Designer.
That was amazing. I'm so happy we got to see both those live today, especially since one's still kind of like, it's not even out yet. That's really, really exciting.
Yeah.
Is there anything Flow Designer change-wise that we've missed in the Vancouver release? Or is there something in particular you'd like to tease for in addition to like Now Assist for any of the store releases?
Well, what I would say is since we launched the diagram view in San Diego, we've recognized that there's been like a content gap, specifically with some of the flow logic and what is supported in the diagram view. And in recent releases, we've gotten, do the following in parallel. We've gotten our looping. And then in Vancouver, we also have do the following until, and this go back to logic as well. So I believe at the end of, in an upcoming store release, we will be supporting the try flow logic as well. in the
Oh,
diagram view. So you can kind of have the try-catch behavior both in the text view and the diagram view. And then by the time Washington release comes out, all flow logic should be supported in both the text view and the diagram view.
That's
with the adding of all of these things like try catch or the recommended and stuff like that, it feels like a design philosophy of like basically it's visual, almost like a visual scripting.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that the aim kind of thing? Is that one of the goals?
Well, I mean, kind of one of our visions for our team is we allow people to automate work with clicks, not code. So if you can do something in code, generally our goal is to figure out a low code way to do it. And we recognize that a lot of the people that build with Flow Designer are people that don't identify as app developers. They might be someone who is more comfortable in a clicking, a low code way rather than scripting their own solutions. So anytime we introduce new concepts like a try logic, a lot of care and dedication goes in from an engineering and product and design team on how do we make this concept that is traditionally developer focused approachable to people who don't necessarily have that same background. And certainly some concepts are very niche and very like technical. Error handling can be one of those, and if you dig deep into the bowels of Action Designer, there's all sorts of buttons and switches on fancy error handling scenarios. But yeah, we're really trying to make automation understandable and available for a wider group of people, and there's a lot that goes into that.
Well, it certainly shows.
Yeah. That's really nice. I always like to point out to like it's great for the ones that don't want to dive into learning the code or asking a citizen developer to learn all the ins and outs of scripting is a tall order. But for like people that have been doing development or people that do know how to do coding or JavaScript and stuff, I still would rather go into low code interface to do some of these things because like I can't drag and drop steps when I'm in my script. I can't visualize the diagram. I can't do those kind of things. Like I'd rather a lot of these things make my job so much easier because abstract away the nonsense that I don't want to deal with every day. Please do that. A lot of those things I would want to jump into. And then like you said, like when you jump into actions or when you jump into certain interfaces in flows and subflows, you still can access scripting. So it's like, oh, you can do a lot in this tool.
And I think, we talked about Now Assist recommendations in Flow Designer right now, but there's some other Now Assist work coming that we're comfortable talking about because it will be in November, but it'll be compatible in Vancouver. But we'll be able to create a flow from a text description. So, and that really enables people who have almost zero experience with Flow Designer. If they can describe what they're trying to accomplish, they're able to create functioning flows from there. Now, they might have to map some data pills to make things work, but we're really hoping to reduce that time from I have an idea for something that I can automate to getting an automation up and running and saving the time of having to find the right update record or update records or look up. Customers shouldn't have to care about that. You should not have to know what you want to accomplish. And if we know that intent, what you want to accomplish, we should help you get there. So.
Absolutely.
I remember that spreadsheet from months ago being sent around. Hey, what are all the use cases for building tech flows and stuff like that? I was like, what is this for? Okay.
What in the world? Yeah. Well, I think it really showcases too how I think that there's a lot of doom and gloom news around AI, right? Like there are bad ways that it can be employed. And I think as a ServiceNow user, I'm really excited with how our company in particular is utilizing it, right? To remove the gunk from working, right? That's the ultimate goal of AI, right? It's like, oh, humans should be able to work on things that they naturally have the capacity to be, creative and better at, but let machines kind of handle the stuff that's like, I shouldn't have to do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
So being able to describe a flow in text, and so basically take something that you could get from a design meeting with a bunch of your colleagues and have that turn into like the beta or even like version of your flow that you can then springboard off of to fine tune. That's unbelievable. That's amazing.
And one of the big use cases, we see this with Flow Designer and definitely with Process Automation Designer as well.
Mm.
In the life cycle of creating automated work,
Mm.
there's always someone normally on the businessy side that says, hey, we need to achieve this outcome. When this happens, we need to talk to these people. We need to get the approval from this person.
Yes.
And then there's normally a developer or an engineer who's responsible for bringing that to life.
Mm.
And something like using AI to automatically create like a skeleton of a flow from a text description is something that helps bridge that gap from person who knows it in text terms to person who knows how to build it in low code.
Yeah.
So really like facilitating that teamwork and getting you to a real solution quicker. Those are the types of things that we want to implement in all of our automation products.
Well, I think that's
awesome
the
stuff.
the perfect and inspirational note to end things on for today. I don't think there's anything else fun that we could showcase. I'm certainly grateful for your time today, Bim. I think you've really not only showcased some stuff that people were dying to see, but helped us like see also some things that maybe weren't like specifically written in like the Tech Now presentation, right? Like the filtering down of the lists and like showing how things bounce back, like adding in that like polish was like so helpful to see.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, hey, thanks for having me on. Hopefully I was able to communicate my enthusiasm for this type of stuff, because stuff like low code and low code automation with Flow Designer, Process Automation Designer, Decision Builder, got to plug all the products in the family. They're totally my jam. Like, this is stuff I'm really interested in, and really our whole team is focused on making it a lot easier to use. So anytime we can jump on and kind of evangelize the work that our team is doing, everyone from product to design to engineering and research, always happy to jump on and sing the good praise of the work.
Yeah, we got to keep getting you on this show, because you're apparently building a good reputation on these shows, because people are starting to say, if you saw at the beginning, someone in the chat, my favorite PM. So it's like, if you keep coming here with all this good stuff, no wonder.
Yeah. Well, I'm also in that SN Dev Slack. So if that's linked in the notes or whatever, if anybody wants to get in touch afterwards, I'm in there every once in a while and talking about new features and what's coming. So happy to chat there as well.
Ooh.
Also
Earl's got
LinkedIn.
the links up for his LinkedIn. Awesome.
And on SN Devs, is it just it's at BIM, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
If you at BIM, then that's how you find them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our audience members that also joined us early in the morning to cover this. Again, we are in the middle, actually at the very beginning of our Vancouver release cycle. There's more to come. In fact, there's even more for Flow Designer, Flow Designer adjacent, more Action Designer coming in the later weeks. So if you'd like to have a deeper look into what that calendar looks like, you can go to devlink.sn/Vancouver. For everything that's here. And thank you, Earl, for managing everything behind the scenes and for joining the chat today. It was really, really appreciated as always. And thank y'all and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.